Alright, welcome back everybody. We've had some technical difficulties, but right now we're good. Everything's back to normal. Alright, today we're going to be taking you guys through the history of the NES controllers. I'm sorry, not NES, Nintendo controllers. Nintendo, as you know, over the years have been a very big staple in the video gaming industry. And recently they've released the Nintendo Switch, and we wanted to go take you guys through time and then see how the Nintendo controllers have evolved over time. And let's start with one sec. Let me just get this right. Alright, let's start with the original, the Nintendo Entertainment System, known in Japan as the Famicom. This thing is a classic. So this console came out in Japan in 1983, and it came out in North America in 1985. So this thing has been over 30 years old as of today. And now this was the controller that they came up with. It's a very classic, clean, simple design with a D-pad on the left side, which has been a staple in their controller designs for the next 30 years. And on the right side, you got really simple two-button setup, A and B, and you got select and start right here for the menu buttons. So this was the original, and from there they innovated iteration after iteration. And let's take a look at the next installment. All right, so after the original NES came out, a few years later they came out with the Super NES. The SNES. So this came out in Japan in 1990 and came out in North America in 1991. And this controller we have is the Japanese version, which has the multicolored A, B, X, Y buttons. The North American version just had gray buttons right here and purple buttons right here. So it was a little bit different, slightly different design. And so this controller expanded on the base of the original NES controller. It still kept the iconic D-pad over here, and it's got a select start. And instead of just having A and B, we've got X, Y, and R and L. So from a 2-button setup, we now have a 6-button setup, which tripled the number of buttons we have. And so this was also a big console of its time, and it did very well in both the Japanese market and the North American market. And from there they innovated into the next iteration. But now we have the N64 controller, which we showed you guys last week, and we dissected it and showed you guys what it looked like inside. So this thing came out in 1996 in both Japan and North America. This has very unique design in that it's, instead of 2 handles over here, we got like 3 handles. So, but we've only got 2 hands, so at once you can only be either using this layout, which is using the D-pad, or you'd be using the what do you call it, analog stick right here with the Z trigger right here. So this was very innovative for its time, because at that time, normally the other consoles would just have like the regular 2-side setup. This thing is kind of they're experimenting with a different layout. And now, as you notice, it's only got a start button in the middle. Like the select button is no longer there, and this suggests that they improved their UI design as well. So instead of having an extra button, they simplified and streamlined the menu systems for their in their software. So that's a good sign. And this in this iteration, they got rid of the X and Y buttons. Instead, they added a C, like kind of C pad right here, which has a up, down, left, right arrows. And this will later evolve into a second analog stick on the next iteration. But for now, we have this. And this featured a rumble pack, and you could plug into this slot a rumble pack, and it would make the controller vibrate at certain moments in games. And in future iterations, this would be built into the controllers instead of having to use a separate accessory for it. And so let's see. So this thing then evolved into the GameCube controller a few years later. The GameCube came out in 2001, and now Nintendo has kind of, found its stride in the controller design. And at this time is also when Microsoft came out with Xbox, and then the PlayStation 2 was on the market as well. So the controller designs for all these major consoles have kind of all converged into this, standard two handle layout. And on the left side you had a analog stick and a D-pad, and this is the same with the Xbox controller. And with the PlayStation controller, it's like they have it switched, the D-pad and analog stick. And then when the C panel right here on the N64 controller turned into a full 8-directional analog stick on the GameCube controller. And what's innovative about this one is that it's got different size buttons right here. As you can see, like from before, they were all the same size buttons for the action buttons, and on the PlayStation and the Xbox controllers, they're basically that as well. But Nintendo decided to go with the different size, I guess, a more ergonomic design for the GameCube controller, which is a welcome change, like fresh, kind of fresh thing in the industry, which I really liked. But later they decided to not do it anymore. I'm not sure why, but back then they decided that since A button would be the button that players would press on the most, so they made it the biggest right in the center, and then B button would be right here, and X, Y are kind of equal in that they are more like assisted buttons. And also the Z trigger from the N64 controller became just a shoulder button right here, and they changed the L and R buttons more like, they added like springs underneath to get more of a tactile feeling, and it's now kind of like a button / trigger hybrid for the GameCube. This was a really good console, but it wasn't as big as the PlayStation and the Xbox at the time. But this was very innovative. It has been a great stepping stone in Nintendo's console design as well. And that was 2001 when this came out, and a few years later, 2006, now this thing hit the market, the Nintendo Wii. So in 2006, this was the big thing for casual gamers. This, like, everybody and their grandmother had one of these. Like, literally, people would buy this for their grandparents, so they can because this thing featured motion control, and it's really catered towards more people who do not normally game. They would pick this up and kind of play like Wii Sports, like bowling, baseball, things like that on it. This was pretty cool. And then this controller itself, it simplified the design. They got rid of a lot of buttons. They kept the classic D-pad, and the A button is now here, like a thumb button, and the B button is now a trigger right here. And this thing was also like a remote. Like, you can point at the TV screen with it, and then it would kind of detect where you're pointing at. It's kind of like a pointer mouse too. And when you turn it sideways, it's like more like a classic NES controller, where you got 2 buttons over here, and you got the directional pad right here. And they actually got rid of the start button. Now it's called home. It's got home, and you got the plus and minus buttons right here. And with this came the nunchuck attachment, so you can still play like classic games with it. Now this one adds like an analog stick right here, and it adds a Z trigger and a C button right here. So for some like first-person shooters, you can move like more like traditional controllers, where you use this one, the left side to move, this one to look at, with the camera, things like that. And this is also, it's got like motion controls in here. It's like slightly inferior motion controls in this part. So there's this Wii boxing game where you can like punch like this and you block like this. So it's pretty cool innovation for its time. And after the Wii came out, this was not your only option. So if you want to play some like classic games like Super Smash Brothers, things like that, you could still attach the GameCube controller to it. But they also came out with this, what's called the classic controller, the Wii Classic controller. This thing basically it's a more traditional setup. You got two analog sticks right here, and D-pad right here. You got the A, B, X, Y button. The X and Y buttons make a comeback in here, and you got the L and R, and they split the Z button into two buttons, so ZL and ZR. So this is more like a traditional setup rather than the innovative the remote they're using here. This is interesting because like they decided to put the two analog sticks on the bottom here, like sort of like the PlayStation series, and they moved the cross pad right here. So this is one version of it, and then they had a pro version of this controller, which looks like this. It's still the same setup right here, except it's got more ergonomic grips right here, so you can get a better grip on it and have a better experience with it. And they had these buttons laid out more like the PlayStation button, the ZR, the ZL, and the R and L buttons. So this is another version of the Wii controller. This is another option that you had if you wanted to play the Wii. And lastly, before the Switch came out, like in 2012, they came out with the Wii U. This is the Wii U actually came with like a touchpad controller, which is pretty big. It's like a lot bigger than what we have right here. And but this is what they call the Pro version of the controller, and this is more ergonomic grip, and it's just more comfortable to hold than a big kind of like a tablet-like controller. And this controller, as you can see, it kind of looks like the Xbox controllers now. It's got this ergonomic grip, and it's moved the analog sticks up to the top of the front panel instead of the bottom. So this is interesting design choice that they made, because as in the Xbox controller, the left side is about the same. You got the analog stick, and then you got the D-pad over here, but then they would have it flipped on this side with the other analog stick down here and the action buttons right here, which would be more easy to use for some people. But Nintendo decided to go with a different direction and have the two analog sticks be symmetrical up here and have the action buttons right here. Other stuff remained the same, like the R and L buttons, but they made the Z, R, and ZL buttons more trigger-like. So it's, at this point, all the different companies that make consoles are kind of converging with their controller design. So nowadays we don't get that much innovation besides a few like a new thing here or there. But this is what gamers are mostly comfortable with. So I guess the design choices are pretty simple now. And so this is the latest iteration before the new Switch came out, and we don't have any Switch controllers for now, but keep tuned. We may have someday, and we might be able to show you guys those. And anyways, so this has been eKit Live with me, your host Ray, and hope you guys had a good time looking back on the history of Nintendo controllers, and let us know what your favorite console was and which controller you like best. And stay tuned for next week. We'll have more Facebook Live for you guys. Have a good week.